There we go. All right, I see everyone pouring in now. As always, welcome back. Welcome back to another week in the series on race and police with your host here, Marlo Brooks, an English major studying in the College of Arts and Letters, soon to be graduate, 1 semester to go. I just said that right. We just switched from quarters to semesters, so I just said it right for the first time. So 1 semester to go, and we'll have a bachelor's degree under our belt. So pray with me as we get through 2020. And we thank you all just for joining us again this week. We have a very special episode tonight where we'll be videoing and having an open discussion. So it's a very, very powerful video to watch. I got a glimpse of it earlier, so I'm ready to watch the rest of it with you all tonight. So, as you know, we always start things off with our land acknowledgement, to which the ground on which CSUSB sits on. And again, it's just paying homage and respect to our land and to the ones who prosper from our land, which is everyone in the CSUSB industry. So, without further ado, okay, thank you guys. So, we recognize that CSUSB sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that everybody of the CSUSB community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and the occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold CSUSB more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people. So thank you. Now, my lovely co-host couldn't make it tonight, so I'll be covering her portion of intros tonight. So Yvette, as you all know, she covers the recent news in today's climate. So she sent me over her notes. So even though she couldn't be here, she still did her homework. We got excellent students at CSUSB. She sent me over her notes. I'm going to read them all for you guys, and then we're going to get our show rolling. So this week in New Haven, Connecticut, citizens marched in an anti-police violence protest. Habitants of the neighborhood expressed a long history of police and civic office collusion to convict Black community members wrongfully and disproportionately. Not surprised, among the protesters was Emma Jones, at the spot where an East Haven police officer shot and killed her son 23 years ago. Jones has been a prominent force of change in the community since the murder of her son, having successfully lobbied for a police commission review and anti-racial profiling laws. Now she has her sights set on reopening Malik's case and getting justice for her child. Neighbors rallied behind her to call for action. It is valid 23 years later, or 83 years later. Emmett Till still deserves justice. Your not so friendly acquaintances still deserve justice. Breonna Taylor still deserves justice. So thank you, Yvette, for giving us some of the latest news and updates, what's going on around the world. I think it's very important that we continue to keep our ear to what's going on out there, as we pray for those who are out there on the front lines, protesting every day, marching every day, and then the ones that's seeking to get involved as well. So we thank you. At this time, we'll pass things over to one of our lead organizers, Robie Madrigal, who's gonna introduce our film.
Thank you, Marlo. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As Marlo mentioned, I'm one of the organizers of the program. Before I introduce the film, I wanted to thank the individuals who work behind the scenes to make this program possible, because it's a lot of work. That's Parker Brooks and Thin Lee from the academic technologies and innovation. I'd also like to extend thanks to our graphic designers who put together these great flyers for us. Brian Banuelos, who works in Coyote Radio and Advertising, and our student assistant in the Pfau Library, her name is Reagan Reynolds. So they both help us with the flyers, and we appreciate their help. The film Profiled was released in 2016. It was directed and produced by British-born, New York-based independent filmmaker Kathleen Foster. Her films, which focus on social justice, have been screened at a variety of national and international venues, including the Museum of Modern Art, the World Performing Arts Festival, Columbia, UCLA, Harvard, Princeton University, among other venues. The catalyst for the film, she said, was the June 2012 police killing of Chantel Davis. She was a young African-American woman who was shot by police through the window of her car. It happened in Flatbush. It's a borough in Brooklyn, near where Kathleen lives. The film's distributor is Women Make Movies. It's a multiracial nonprofit media arts organization. I actually had an opportunity to watch the film, and what I especially like is its integration of art to humanize the victims and to amplify their voices and the families of those victims. You know, these police killings, they're very deeply traumatic events that have a number of harmful cascading consequences. So with that said, I'd like to start the screening of the film.
This surveillance video shows what happened moments before the shooting death of Ramarley Graham. He appears to be walking casually into his home. Neighbors tell us police entered the house, then went upstairs to Graham's apartment and opened fire.
Ramarley was not running, and he was dead, and we have no answers. And as mother, none of us here got any answer to why our kids is dead.
I saw the accident when the two cars collide, and then the cops pulled up and asked her to get out the effing car. She didn't get a chance to come out, so they fired 2 shots, then they drag her out.
June 14th, my sister, Chantel, was murdered on East 38th Street in Brooklyn. She was shot in the chest and dragged out of the car and laid down to bleed out.
My name is Margarita Rosario, and I'm the mother of Anthony Rosario and the aunt of Hilton Vega, who were murdered execution style on January 12, 1995 by Detective Patrick Bronson and Detective James Crow. These were 2 ex-bodyguards of former Mayor Giuliani.
In 1994, my son was playing football with his 4 brothers, and a police officer put a chokehold on him. And this was a police officer that was used to being abusive in the community, and that killed him.
It was a Saturday. The night was calm. Everything was okay, you know. Sometime after 10 o'clock, my son's phone rang, and my son said, "Ma, Kimani got shot. Kimani got shot by the police." I said, "The police?" It still didn't register because Kimani has no reason to be shot by the police. But everyone is calling from the neighborhood. They shot him, they shot him. He's on the ground and they won't let us see him. They keep chasing us with their guns, waving their guns. When we got to the hospital, I was frantic, I was hysterical. I just want to like explode. Halfway going down the hall, the doctor was coming towards me. He had tears in his eyes. He said, your son had multiple gunshot wounds. He said he has multiple gunshot wounds. I tried to save him, but he took too long to get here. He lost so much blood.
Well, officers and detectives were out here on East 52nd Street. Police officers say 2 cops were on patrol when they noticed a group of teens. They say 16-year-old Kimani Gray broke away from the group and adjusted his waistband. When the 2 officers approached the teen, they say he pulled out this gun and pointed it at the officers. Both cops fired shots, hitting the boy several times in the body. Police say Gray has a lengthy criminal record, including inciting a riot, grand larceny, and grand theft auto.
Now, over the past 48 hours, several neighbors have come forward to contradict the police version of events. One of them is a 26-year-old woman who claims she witnessed the shooting from 4 doors down the street.
His hands was up and he was telling them, please stop, please stop.
Her account is fundamentally different from that of the 2 officers.
He didn't have a gun, he had his hands up. The only thing they probably found suspicious was him pulling up his pants.
Another protest is planned for tonight.
I know Kimani is not the type of person to hurt anyone, like to cause the police to brutalize him like that, and then to turn around and be demonized and be labeled as a gang member. Now you show me a blood member that attends school 5 days a week, does after-school programming, travels an hour-and-a-half journey to go to school. You show me a gang member that doesn't have even 1 scar, not 1 tattoo, has a curfew. Kimani was just trying to be a 16-year-old. Want to be in parties, want to, you know, get associated with girls. That's it.
This was obviously something that was never expected. And to get a phone call that your sister was killed, and then to find out it was by NYPD, of course, had to be extremely shocking. The community was outraged. There was protests in the street.
As soon as it happened, we had a rally against the murder and tried to organize in the neighborhood, find people who were witnesses. We started to form a committee, and we would do marches from the location where she was murdered to the police precinct where Officer Philip Atkins resided.
When my sister was killed, the first thing that happened, she was dehumanized. The media said that she was a mastermind criminal, she was arrested, you know, all these negative things. But in fact, she may have been arrested, but never convicted of a crime. And whatever happened that day did not mean she needed to be killed. And that's what made my family and I jump into the streets trying to, I guess, change the perception, change the name that they had put out there for her. Now today, with remembering my sister, and I'm not going to be, I'm gonna try not to be irate today.
You see every day kids are being murdered, they've been beaten up, and nothing has been done about it.
What NYPD don't realize is that they're connecting us borough by borough, state by state, coast by coast. And they don't even know how big this is gonna get.
It pisses me off every time I hear somebody say she has a record. People could just accuse you of something, you get locked up.
I know a person that overheard an officer say that it was a black man with a hoodie, 5'10", and he's loose. In this neighborhood, that's like so vague, and now they're running around and chasing after everyone. They can say, you are a criminal at any time. So it's very powerful that the family's deciding to stand up and say, no, this is not the story that's going to be written about our family, but we're going to write our story of how it is.
It's pretty ironic to know that you see somebody come in every day and, you know, they buy that $3 special. And 3 other kids come in, and that $3 meal was like fun to them, you know? They love that stewed chicken, and you should see him smile when he get chicken eating it all the time. You know, he's gonna be missed though.
There's a lot of people standing around here that understand exactly what I'm feeling right now. As we mourned each child, the same pain runs on through. And we are out here today just to make a stand to say, not just Kimani's life matter, but all lives matter. No matter what race or color you are, corruption is corruption. And that's how you spell NYPD.
That's right, that's right.
You know, as a principal, I fight to keep our school's name out of the paper. But when Kimani passed, I wanted it in the paper. But all we read for a week was that he was a thug, was that he was a gangbanger. A dead teen, not a man, not a person. Kimani was friends with everybody in high school. That's Kimani. He should be here with us now, telling us where he's going to college and what he's going to do next. We love you, Carol.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When Kamali Gray got killed, I mean, it was so painful for me. It was almost like I was reliving the death of my son all over again. My son was 13 years old when he was murdered. We're talking about innocent lives here. We're not talking about someone who was committing a crime. We're talking innocent lives.
My mission is to get these cops into court. I need to seek justice for my son. I need to know what happened. I need to know why you did this to my son. I need to know why you fired 11 bullets. I need to know why you targeted my son.
Iris and I have been to numerous funerals for young people who have been killed. For so many years, there was just one family fighting alone.
We want justice for children. We want rights for all humans.
But when we joined forces together, it was powerful.
We want to not just disturb our community, but America itself. What's happening in this community is not a small thing. It's something that's way bigger, and you need to pay attention to what's going on.
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
No racist!
Police!
This is Kenneth Chamberlain, who's in the military. This is Malcolm Ferguson. Chantel Davis. Yeah, this is Nicholas Hayward's son. I've done so many of these. Here's Kamani Gray. I got involved because I was so outraged by the police just murdering, you know, young people and people in general without apparent cause. My work at Project Reach is really, I feel connected with the October 22nd coalition against police brutality and stop and frisk, because we're dealing many times with the same population of young people who are being targeted. Personally, I feel the police department is a civilian standing army in terms of communities of color. They want to keep the things in order for the people who run the city, who own the city.
When I go outside, my mom tells me, oh, watch out for suspicious people and watch out for the cops. Like, we've become scared of the cops. They've become like a predator. They can be white. Like, whenever you see a cop, it's like, oh, the cops are here. Even if you're not doing anything, because you're like, oh, they might stop me. They might mess with me. They might do something or trigger something that makes me react, that might give them a reason to take me in. And since we're little, we're told that, like, watch out for the cops. And why should you have to watch out for people who are supposed to protect us?
We're here to show our solidarity for justice. Rest in peace, Kamani and Chantel. No justice, no peace against these racist police out here.
This is our first annual Hoops for Justice basketball tournament in honor of my sister Chantel Davis and Kamani Gray. Both were killed by NYPD less than a year apart in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. I feel like our community is broken, and we need to let these kids understand that we are here and there's things to do, there's people that you could come to talk to, that if you feel violated by NYPD in any way, there is ways to deal with it.
In this neighborhood, there's a lot of gang activity, actually. So Chantel Davis and Kamani Gray's family set this up for the youth to come out together and stand as a united voice to stand up against police brutality as well as gang activity. So in spite of that negativity, we could be a voice of connection in the area.
Today we're out here showing the community that there's more to life. We're trying to get the resources for them like this, like an every year basketball thing. Somewhere they could be safe. They could come out and enjoy themselves. The stop and frisk thing, the cops see them, harass them. They have numbers and resources they could reach out to and call.
I'm happy to be out here today in honor of Chantel Davis and Kamani Gray. Make some noise for Chantel and Kamani.
In 2012, there were 685,726 people they stopped at Frisk. Now, out of those people they stopped, we already know that 85% of those people of color, and 600,000 of them was innocent people. So they were stopped for no reason. They was never given a citation. They was never locked up.
The stop and frisk lawsuit was started in 2008 by the Center for Constitutional Rights on behalf of hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers to end the police department's practice of unconstitutionally stopping and frisking and racially profiling communities of color. The New York Police Department was justifying their practices as necessary, as important in terms of reducing crime, as getting guns off the street. In reality, what the NYPD was doing was stopping largely innocent Black and Hispanic New Yorkers.
It's not reducing crime. It's not getting guns off the street. I mean, to stop close to 700,000 people in 2012 and get only, 0.1% gun off the street, that's not working.
The stop and frisk case, after several years, finally went to trial. Ultimately, the judge agreed with the Center for Constitutional Rights and the plaintiffs in the case and found that the NYPD had a custom of violating the constitutional rights of New Yorkers. It was a tremendous victory, but unfortunately, racial profiling and racial disparities continue to rise.
Right now, for example, I've seen more cop cars in my neighborhood than before. Like, they just have police officers sitting down, waiting, picking up people for minor offenses.
Take you left for what? I didn't show anything. I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time. Please just leave me alone.
Eric Garner was supposedly stopped for selling loose cigarettes. If indeed he was stopped because of a low-level nonviolent offense, it really indicates the broader problem. Black people having to interact with the police more often. and that these interactions have become increasingly violent. The Eric Garner killing brought this home for us, that this is one of the most obvious outgrowths of America's racist history, and this is part of a national problem of racial profiling, a national problem of the killing of unarmed Black and Hispanic people.
So as of today, there were 2,104 people killed by police nationally since 2013 May. This year so far, 239 people already. 748 people since Eric Garner was killed, and 685 people since Mike Brown was killed. And those are very recent cases that are still very fresh in our minds. And it's like, how many of these cases have we heard since? So it's like how much coverage and how much attention is brought to the fact that this is an epidemic.
Racial profiling is a funny thing. We don't have biological races. We do have socially defined races, and much of the difficulty that our societies struggle from are from this social and cultural history. For example, skin color. If you look at the number of genes that actually contribute to this variation in skin color, it's about 6. So if we consider the number of protein coding genes in the human genome at around 250,000, only 6 of those are accounting for differences in skin color. So while social norms are deeply aligned around what color a person's skin is throughout our history, particularly the modern history, in terms of the genetics of that, do the division. 6 out of 250,000 is absolutely insignificant.
I was stopped by the cops just because I was walking down the street. Just because apparently there was a cell phone robbery, and I just happened to be dark-skinned walking down the street, right? How do you think that makes me feel?
My mom, she fears for my brother to go outside, and he's about to be 21 tomorrow, and she's still scared for him to go outside because of the things that has happened to him in the past, just because he has color on their skin.
No justice! Peace. No racist! Police. No justice! No peace.
No racist! Police!
The school is mainly Black and Latin, lower income students, but it's in the middle of one of the most wealthy neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and it's mainly white. Our students don't get treated the same way that other students in the neighborhood get treated. They have to go through metal detectors, and they have to take off their belt and take off their book bags and put them through scanners. And when our students get out of school, they're approached by security guards or police officers and told that they have to leave the neighborhood, that they can't be out on the street. So our students experience racism on a daily basis, just in trying to come to school.
Racism is institutionalized, right? It appears in every facet of our society. Who gets the services, who gets the education, who gets the jobs, who gets exposure to a life beyond what they know. And for the young people of color that I work with, they don't get that opportunity a lot.
Portraits. Brush laden with black paint strikes the primed white cardboard surface. I trace the outline of a face. The eyes speak. I discover their age by the way skin falls across muscle, bone, nerves. These are portraits of young and old, the majority people of color, poor, killed by the police. The anger and sadness I feel as I paint these faces cannot be measured against the grief and strength of the families who speak out against the violence. People whose lives are cut short because of the color of their skin and class, schools and educational systems that fail them, living with a hunger of stomach and spirit. People killed by being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Why? Why?
Why? All right.
In The Emperor's New Clothes, I give the long story of how we began to classify human beings into biological groups. So we begin with Columbus in 1492. For the first time, 3 segments from the genetic spectrum of human beings, Western Europeans, Western Africans, and Amerindians brought together in circumstances of manifest social inequality. The Europeans were forcing the Amerindians off their land and carrying out warfare against them to take their lands, and they enslaved Western Africans to generate the agricultural wealth which they were using to build their colonies. To do this required an intellectual enterprise justifying how this could be allowed. Now, the first portion of this was entirely based upon Christian belief, or what they thought was Christian belief. So Europeans were the descendants of Adam and Eve, whereas Africans and Amerindians were descendants of other Adams and other Eves, and thus were not truly members of the human species. When we begin the scientific racism of the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, so-called scholars were doing measurements of human characteristics designed to support the notion of the superiority of persons of European descent and the inferiority of persons of non-European descent, of which Africans were considered the most inferior. It really was appropriating the language of science, but there's no objective scientific rationale for it. It was used to justify the brutal enslavement and murder that was carried out against these people in building what would become the United States of America.
A lot was happening in my community. I mean, a lot was happening.
She was begging for help. They did nothing. She's dead. I had to fight for 9 months in order to get the names of the police officers that was involved with my daughter's death. 9 months, but I finally got something. We got the names of the officers. But my daughter's not gonna die in vain.
It was killings rampant by police officers, a lot of racial tension, but you can't just find out about things without understanding the foundation. Why does racism exist? Why is it okay for police brutality to exist? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to read Lerone Bennett's The Shaping of Black America. The race problem in America was a deliberate invention of men who systemically separated blacks and whites in order to make money. So when you think of that from the baseline, the core line of like, why are certain choices being made? Why are certain people treated more favorably than others? And then you find out it's about money. It's not about necessarily just black and white power. It all ends up being monetary.
American chattel slavery was an institution that allowed persons of European descent to extract labor from persons of African descent to support the wealth and luxuries of the Southern planter class. In terms of agricultural labor, 60% of the exchange profit between the beginning of the United States and 1860 was generated by slave labor. So this was a hugely profitable institution, and its profits were what drove the support for it. Complicit with that, of course, were the bankers who had bankrolled the slave ships and the loans to acquire slaves and so forth. In the founding of the American colonies, initially, African indentured servants and European indentured servants were treated equivalently. They not only worked together and lived together, they intermarried.
Imagine before, when it was the European workers and the African workers and the Indian workers that were working together, and they had one common enemy, the bosses or the plantation owner. Of course, rebellions did happen, so that's when the laws were made to separate these groups, because it was too much to have the workers be united together. In the chapter, The Road Not Taken, Bennett wrote, "The decade of the 1660s was the first great fork in the making of Black America. Because it was at this fork that certain men decided to ground the American economic system on human slavery. But first one must understand the roads leading to this fork, roads that were not taken. The first road was the road of fraternal cooperation with the Native Americans. This road was rejected out of hand by the white founding fathers who adopted a policy of genocide. The second road was a free and cooperative system of labor for all immigrants. This road was also not taken, and only two alternatives were left: temporary servitude and eventually freedom for all workers, red, black, and white, or the road of permanent servitude based on the work of one or possibly all three. This last road was taken, and one group was singled out for permanent servitude.
A decision was made, particularly in the southern colonies in the late 17th century, to turn African indentured servants into chattel, such that they would never have the capacity to free themselves in the way that European indentured servants were allowed to. They were bought and sold, their bodies did not belong to them. Corporal punishment was instituted of the most horrific variety that was not present before when people had been indentured servants.
The development of the slave system and the systemic separation of blacks and whites created a race problem in America. It divided the working force, made it impossible to create a single American community, and laid the foundation for an anti-democratic police state, taught with tensions and fears.
Racism certainly has been a tool used to divide white and black people and white and black workers.
The bosses maximize their profits by paying black and immigrant workers less than white workers, which causes low wages and conditions for the whole working class.
There's no mistake that there's an economic benefit to perpetrating these myths about black people, because it prevents people with a huge stake in working together from organizing. And I think that's been a tool throughout history, you know, divide and conquer. After slavery was ended, there was a brief period of Reconstruction, followed by a very, very bad period in American history of Jim Crow segregation, where discrimination was permitted by law. The civil rights movement helped to change that, to eliminate legal discrimination. But I think the attitudes of the inferiority and the kind of inherent nature of black people have not yet been addressed and uprooted.
The United States is as segregated now as it was in the 1950s. There have been some cosmetic gains with regard to public accommodations and changes in popular culture. But when we look at the fundamental aspects of life in this society, one's chances are still determined by one's socially defined racial category.
I'm scared for my little brother. I'm scared for everybody's little brother, because when they go out, they might get shot. I'm scared for my kids in the future that when they go out, they're going to get shot, and it's not fair. At this age, at 16 years old, thinking about that, that's a scary thing. I'm scared for my mother. My mother's scared for my little brother. I'm scared. It's not fair.
Why it's important for me to come here is because I was also a student here in John Jay. I came here in 1988 when I was a freshman, and back then they called this school Jungle Jay. Why they called it Jungle Jay? Because they considered us animals. And sadly enough, that hasn't changed. 26 years later, the same thing is going on.
Kids are still being frisked every day. They're still being asked what they have in their pockets, going in their pockets. So they may not have what they call stop and frisk anymore, but it's still being done. They have to bring in the numbers. They have to bring in the money to the city. So when people get summons and tickets and stuff like that, they go to pay a fine and different things. It's all money that's being generated back into the system, and it's coming from the communities that don't even have the resources to pay.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
In Ferguson, Missouri today, more angry confrontations between protesters and police in riot gear. Protesters march with their hands up, the stance witnesses say Brown took, and chanted.
He's running this way. He turns his body towards this way, hands in the air, being compliant. He gets shot in his face and chest and goes down and dies.
The circumstances of the Michael Brown killing were outrageous, to say the least. The fact that neighbors witnessed this young black man who was headed off to college essentially surrendering to the police. He was unarmed and he was shot 6 times, twice in the head, and his body was left in the street for 4 hours. Those circumstances are infuriating, but the fact that the killing came just weeks after the country witnessed the killing of Eric Garner, the confluence of those factors contributed to this great and justified anger.
Michael Brown Jr. Michael Brown Jr. was 18. Police left his body in the street for 4.5 hours.
I went with a group of about 50 people to Ferguson on November 28th after the decision came out that they were not going to indict the police officer who killed Michael Brown. We had a march outside the precinct, and as we were trying to march into the street, they came in full riot gear. The police surrounded us and just started arresting people. People were physically abused. One person was beaten to the point where a metal plate has to be put into his face. Someone else was maced, where they couldn't open their eyes for 4 hours, and other people sustained injuries as well. It does seem that the police have responded differently in Ferguson than other places around the country. I think because of how militant the fight back has been in Ferguson, and how poignant the people are who live there at blaming the system as opposed to just an individual cop.
I was actually in Ferguson during a peaceful protest that was fired upon with tear gas by police officers. What I witnessed was a very, very heavy militarized police presence. I was, participating in a peaceful march. People were not expecting violence. The police did begin to fire tear gas into the crowd. We saw the sparks of the tear gas canisters and the mist of smoke and gas. We ran back to what we believed was a safe place on West Florissant Avenue where the press had gathered. And the cops again fired tear gas at us. Canisters fell several feet away from where I was standing.
You couldn't go, half a block without seeing a tank or an up-armored truck, snipers on the roof, helicopters flying, shining their lights, following people. I had never seen anything like that, even having been in the military for 4 years.
The folks in Ferguson decided to stay out and protest. And in doing so, I think they protected the rights of all Americans to act up against the imposition of barriers to communities' rights to assemble, to speak freely about matters of public importance. I think all of America owes them a huge, tremendous debt.
We are gathered here this evening as a result of a series of events that occurred across coasts. From the murders of Michael Brown and Eric Garner to the abuse young people receive behind bars, the message is clear. Policing, both directly and indirectly, have amassed into a collective discontent.
The issue for me, primarily, is that the police is only part of a larger system that is the problem. Okay, and when I say that, I mean the capitalist system, I mean the white supremacist system. I was actually there in Ferguson the first week, and I saw something that I connected back to my Latin American roots, militarization. And that comes from a history of imperialism from the United States to those countries. And so we're talking about a whole lot of Fergusons throughout the Americas.
We can't kid ourselves about the nature of the political process that constantly evaluates our political rights and our true human value in sheer terms of costs and benefits. They can get away with it because they choose to get away with it.
Something feels different about this than some other sort of moments that I've experienced, and it was something about being on the streets with young people, literally putting their lives on the line for what they're imagining as justice is just remarkable.
What was most important to me, what I found most inspirational, is that in a very short period of time, you could see people teaching themselves the fundamentals of grassroots organizing. So the people who were in this community, and these were young people, began saying, we have to have a vigil. And then that vigil became a protest. And then that protest became an uprising. And then that uprising laid the seeds for what's now becoming a movement.
My name is Dante. I'm from Ferguson, out there in Ferguson. Lost Voices, the organization I've been dealing with. I don't know if you heard about it. We did shut down 3 malls, successfully shut down 3. They closed 3 malls, completely closed them around Black Friday time.
Arrest Darren Wilson! Arrest Darren Wilson!
One no blood, one no crib, one no bike club, one no TV, one no problem. Women, men, children, women that didn't even know they'd be part of the movement, came out there marching, motivated people across the world to say, police, we standing up, we ain't taking that no more.
Ferguson is everywhere. Ferguson for me was Chantel Davis in Brooklyn, was Kiki Gray in Brooklyn, but we have Ferguson in Baltimore. Tyron West was killed, his family is here, and we would like you to come up.
On July 18th, 2013, my brother Tyron West was brutally murdered. Like, he wasn't shot, he was beat to death by 11 to 15 police officers. Like, drug out my vehicle 30 minutes after he just dropped me off. We were eating dinner, interrupted by a call to go and give an acquaintance a ride. And from him trying to do somebody a favor, he was brutally murdered. And ever since this happened, we've been on the battlefield from day one, 520 days. We need to change the system, because until the system changes, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. And there's an injustice anywhere. There's an injustice everywhere.
The system is failing. We all know this. We know this already. And it's important that we continue to spread the word. I'm so proud of the youth. Like, she teaches at Park Slope Collegiate. Well, it was John Jay, and that's my school. John Jay, that's why I'm so happy. I'm so proud. Like, when I see the kids out there protesting and taking a stand, like, that's what we need. We need to keep going out there, spreading the word, keep talking. Like I said, even though I feel defeated and I know I'm not going to gain justice for my sister's case, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep it on.
As many of you know, there are lots of people protesting in the streets. We are seeing something happening in our lifetimes that we've never seen before. The fact that we need to remind ourselves and other people that Black Lives Matter is not the world that we want. It is, however, a world that's ours to change.
There's a lot of people who knows that this is wrong, what the police are doing, but they're not doing anything about it. So for the people who are coming out to our protests every day and fighting hard and making statuses on Facebook, I really commend you and I really thank you, because not a lot of people have enough courage to do this.
For Eric, we got to fight back. For Key Money, we got to fight back. For Trayvon, we got to fight back. For Sean Bell, we got to fight back.
Young people have always led the fight against oppression. Racist oppression, oppression against capitalism. The rebellions in the streets during the Civil Rights Movement. The youth also took to the streets in Ferguson just this past summer and led the way against these racist attacks. You guys tonight are just another step in that historical process.
Our young people are wonderful examples of what it means to fight for their rights. When you're angry, you are no longer complacent. And when you are no longer complacent, there's an opportunity for change.
So many of our youth have been gunned down senselessly. Modern day lynching in the city streets. The victims of violence are so often the poor. They're either killed in their own neighborhoods or die in rich men's wars.
In this picture, this is my daughter, Soraya. She was a little bit over 1 when this picture was taken. She's 6 now. Chantel died when she was 3 years old. So forget about what you've read. Know that she was a loving, caring person, and I'm never going to forget her, and I'm going to continue to fight for her and for all the other victims. I don't want to wait for the next person to be killed. There's so many that's fighting for justice, that wants rights. It's blacks, whites, it's Asians, it's, everybody. We need to show that we all have one motive, and that's just to make this place, this country, a better place.
I think the entire structure, economically, politically, socially, has been hostile toward black people in the United States since the inception of our time here. And it's a testament to the will of this community that we've been able to carve out the niche of recognition for our humanity that we currently have, that we have to fight tenaciously to hold on to.
There isn't any change that has been done to
to stop this police brutality as far as through this system. This system continues to criminalize our youth over and over again. False hopes, false dreams, and false promises. Yeah. That's what our elected officials give us. Yeah. So it's going to take all of us to stop this madness and all of this murder that's happening in New York City and across the country.
I do think things are not going to be the same. I think that people are much more aware of what's going on. They're much less susceptible to these kind of fake solutions like body cameras on the police or having a black mayor. So I think that people are going to be searching for a real solution.
As Michelle Alexander so eloquently stated, America was not made for us, but we, together with all people of conscience, must make America what it must become. I will not pretend to have the answers, but I think we ought to ask some different questions, including if the reform dance fails again and again, isn't it time we consider a more radical approach?
What does that say about the system? All these unarmed people killed. We want to make sure that this doesn't happen to another family. We don't want another mother's heart broken. So let's unite. Let's stand together because we want justice for all.
Kimani died and we march and we riot and we rave. And still, there comes Eric Garner, Mike Brown. I can't even say the names. All we're saying is we're fed up and we're not going to take this no more. This is going to be another Baltimore if this don't stop.
I'm terrified almost to even think of the future unless something changes. Because if something doesn't change, it's going to be the same thing over and over again.
We're going to do what we have to do. We're going to stand up for what we stand up for. And we're going to fight.
A revolution has to happen. It has to.
Mornings and I can't tell.
Why must we go through all this pain? Why must we go through this strain? You know we gotta find a way. We gotta find a way out. 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 We gotta find a way. These streets are a jungle waiting.
Thank you guys. Thank you for staying tuned. I hope we got a lot from that film as it just shows our representation in this country as minority members of our communities. It gave a lot of history. It gave a lot of context to how we got here today and how we not gained much stride in our fight for justice and human rights. You know, things that our ancestors have been fighting for in their time, and we're still fighting for the same things. One thing that we did gain was a lot of youth civic engagement out there, and that's just joyous to see all across the country. So many of our young peers are out there on the front lines, really seeing these injustices for what they are and wanting to change. They don't want to grow up in a world like this anymore. As much as we've been fighting, they don't want to grow up and see it and have to raise their kids in this environment as well. So to see that was just joyous to see. That was one great takeaway I got from the film, to see that type of activism in our youth. I'm also joined today by a familiar face, Mr. Stan Futch. We didn't get to introduce him earlier, but you'll get to see him a lot more as he, as a prominent leader in his community, in our community. To hear his voice on these matters weekly, it does help. So Stan, we're happy you're back, happy you're here.
Thank you. What I got out of the film was just something, lots of things that had so much information. But one of the things I did see is, could you imagine being bused to a school or going to a school that's a prominent school in a prominent neighborhood, and on your way home every day, somebody's searched and frisked? Could you imagine your third time being searched and frisked and thinking the next day, do I want to go to school? Do I even want to go to school? When I'm in school, do I want to study? Do I want to be a part of the curriculum? And that's got to weigh on a young person. They had names for the school that were derogatory. It's just a hard thing to see when the city of New York was doing what they were doing to search and frisk. And Robie, thanks for the link, because the bottom line is the pressures on those young people to do right when they were already doing right had to be tremendous, had to be tremendous.
Robie, did you have anything to add to that going into our daily discussion?
Yeah, I actually, just a quick observation. So the film was released in 2016, and I was just thinking, it's just how tragic that there could have been added dozens of names to that list if the film were produced today. It seems as though things, no matter how many protests, things don't change. I just hope, I really hope that this time it's different, because the mother of, I believe it was one of the young ladies killed. I mean, just seeing her, the raw emotion, I mean, it's just deeply moving. And what I like about the film is that it focuses on the family members, the trauma that they go through, what they experience. And it's not just a one-time event. I mean, this trauma lasts a lifetime. And going back to what Stan said about, you're a student, a person of color going to school, and you're being stopped and frisked, how does that affect your day? How does that affect your ability to learn? So these education achievement gaps, I think that's one of the components that has to be looked at. And I'm sure there's studies out there. But I had a question for Mary regarding stop and frisk, because Mary, I know, and I hope you'll share with us your experience, but stop and frisk is the police officer has to have a reasonable suspicion that the person has committed a crime, is committing a crime, or about to. But I mean, that's what the law says. I understand it's called a Terry stop, but I'm not sure that always takes place, right?
No, I think police officers have a lot of discretionary power, especially when cameras are not on them. They have a lot of discretionary power. And even though, like it was said in the film, even though stop and frisk in New York City has been eliminated, thanks to pressure on the mayor, de Blasio, they're doing the same thing and just renaming it something else. But it used to be that probable cause was, it was like God in policing. You cannot stop someone unless you have probable cause. But take, for example, the immigration crackdown in Arizona. One of the probable causes was you looked at somebody's shoes and decided that, citizens don't wear shoes like this, so I'm going to stop you and I'm going to investigate you. So it could be the flimsiest, the busted taillight, that's become sort of a cliche. Busted taillight, failure to stop within a certain distance for a stop sign or a traffic signal. So I think that that, you know, cops pretty much do what they want to do. And our public officials are not holding their feet to the fire. That coupled with the unions, and, you know, I've said often is even in this space that I am a union person. I'm a union person. However, there are some unions that that are not, you know, if you want to, you know, unionize for better pay or safer working conditions, but you know, whole police departments or units in police departments are quitting because they, you know, they banned the chokehold. So what is that? And the union is backing them up. So what does that say about what the goals of unions are? A lot of times we have the excuse is, well, we have to keep the community safe, or we got to keep cops safe. That's all emotional. There are no data to back that up. Cops are not in danger the way they would have us believe, the way we see on television. They're not in danger. And by and large, I know we've said it before in this space, they don't stop crime. They absolutely don't stop crime. If you study all of the police or all of the school shootings in the last 20 years or so, starting with Columbine, there were cops at those schools, and mostly in white areas, cops in the schools. And they, you know, you have to be practically in every classroom, in every hallway to stop something like that. And so we are spending billions on policing in this country, billions. And I think this is the theme that has been going through our program for the last few months. We spend billions on, you know, for example, campus cops, and yet we have no counseling in schools. We're taking resources that could very well, you know, prevent crime by having programs in schools, by bringing art, bringing music back to schools. I know it's a kind of a long answer, Robie, and I appreciate your question, but you know, it all sort of builds on itself.
Just hearing you speak on that matter, Mary, it brings back a lot for myself. When I was growing up, we had after school programs and community centers that was live and well. And ever since the government started cutting funding to those things, crime got higher, danger got more serious, neighborhoods became unsafe because our kids were, especially the youth, were getting shot down or murdered or hurt or anything. All of these things weren't going on it wasn't a norm, you know, when I was growing up, because I had somewhere to go after school. I had huge community centers where they had people on staff and you know, with craft boards and, you know what I'm saying, crafts and games and things to keep you entertained. And they even had people, patrols like that'll walk kids to where they're gathering for what side they're going, and they'll walk them halfway there with their parents. You know, it was just, that was the norm when I was growing up. And ever since those things were getting funded, as well as sports and entertainment and music and everything else in school that could entertain a child and help develop them, we saw more danger posed to it. Another interesting thing was when we talk about police quotas, you know, when Robie mentioned stop and frisk, you know, in their mind, it's, well, I got to get this, we got to reach these quotas for the month, you know, so I can just naturally say anything made me feel suspicious of this character.
But that's not official.
Not official, but we're talking about.
It's not written down anywhere that, because police departments all over the country will say, we don't have quotas. But if you don't make at least one felony arrest a year or a month, then, you know, people are going to start looking at you, right? So
Well,
we just need to make sure that everybody knows that it's not an official policy. Quotas are not official policy.
It feels official, Mary.
It does, yes.
One of the things we talk about is the norm, and what is the norm? And we talked about, you know, search and frisk. And one of the interesting things was, one of the reasons why they started picking out African Americans was sports gear, cross colors, FUBU, and that's just the craziest thing, because that was our norm. It wasn't your norm, but it was our norm. And you picked our norm and made it your abnormal. And so it's interesting. I was on a panel a couple of days ago, and it was peace officers. And one of the things they had talked about was how you don't learn when you get on the job, you learn prior to getting on the job. So how you grew up and how your life was is how you will be a peace officer. And although they do go through a rigorous testing and background check and psych test and all that stuff, you're pretty established when you get on the job of who you are. And with that in mind, one of the scariest things is you come on the job with preconceived ideas. I did a post on Facebook, and I was checking on the brothers, and I told them how I grew up, and I got it from somebody else. I just posted it, and it was I got so many responses to it of African American males responding to how I grew up is exactly how they grew up. And like Marlo says, we had people that walked us from point A to point B for two reasons. One, so we didn't get in trouble, and two, it was a village. The village was taking care of its people. But if you never grew up in that type of environment, you don't understand it. So when you have a group of kids going home and a grown man taking them from point A to point B, and you're a peace officer, you've never seen that before, you want to know what's going on. So what do? You investigate. And then it gets ugly. It gets ugly. And so I think a lot of it is, I know Bill, let me see, AB 1460 just passed. And that's a big move. And the big move is if they have ethnic studies in the Cal State system, I'm hoping that Latinos aren't going to take Latino ethnic studies. I'm hoping that Blacks aren't going to take Black studies. I'm hoping that whites aren't going to take European studies. I'm hoping that everybody takes everybody else's studies so they can understand the people that they're interacting with daily.
I tell you, Stan, and thank you for that. I think that was just some very insightful observations. I'm not a fan of better training, though, because if police officers can act a certain way in white neighborhoods, that's all Black Lives Matter is asking. We want you to act the same way in our neighborhoods too. You didn't have to have any special training to go and say hi to everybody and go to the church luncheons and that kind of, you didn't have to have any special training for that. But historically, and I know several people have mentioned history, historically, you know, you got millions of people enslaved. And, you know, the biggest nightmare for white Americans in 1865 was what is going to happen with all these folks. You know, they're going to be angry at us. They're going to be angry. And I'll tell you, African Americans don't want revenge. We just want equal treatment. People better be lucky we don't want revenge. They better be lucky we don't want revenge. All we want is equal treatment. But that distrust has found its way, you know, 150 years later, where, you know, you can have in a white community kids walking down the street in a line, and it's going to be going to a picnic or something. But in the Black community, in the brown communities, there's something suspicious going on. Right. You know, you've got folks walking or riding around all day long, don't have anything to do, so they're going to make themselves have something to do. And I'm not a fan also of the bad apple theory, because bad apples, if nobody reports the bad apples, then everybody's a bad apple. There were 20-some people standing around watching Rodney King be killed. I mean, not killed, but be beaten, almost killed. 20-some people, and only 2 people reported it. And those were law enforcement officers. And that man almost died. So it's this distrust. You grow up with this idea that African Americans, Latinos are less than human, and you begin treating them like that. That Black mothers all over this country are scared for their sons, as I am, scared for our sons, that they go out and we don't know if they're going to come home. Not only do they have to look out for the so-called bad guys, but they got to look out for the cops too. Because anything can happen. You get pulled over, anything can happen. And yet I still hear on social media people saying, well, if he had just not acted suspicious. What does that mean? When Black folks do something, it's suspicious. When white folks do something, it's not suspicious. Same thing. Black kid and white kid go into court the same day, same judge, same crime. Black kid gets 2 months, or excuse me, white kid gets 2 months, Black kid gets 28 years. Same judge. So does this system have to change? You bet it does.
I wonder what the elections upon us, how would that change? The police after the elections is over, what would that look like? Would the aggressiveness become more if their fan favorite doesn't win? So it's just a lot at the helm, but right now it's just such a crucial time for the nation to really get involved, really educate themselves on voting and their rights and things like that, because going forward, everything changes. Everything from our rights, from our communities, from our education, everything changes going forward. So we have to wake up now. We have to be involved. We have to be attentive, and we have to do everything intentionally right now. As the matter proceeds, as you see, protesting has not died down. As many distractions they throw daily. Daily they're throwing distractions to get us off of this topic, to get a country moving forward for their monetary value. Don't forget, like the young lady said earlier in the film, that it wasn't much more so about Black and white. It was more so about the monetary system of it all. So as they throw these distractions our way, it's very important to stay on track, stay intuitive of what's going on around you, not just in your household, not just in your community, but what's going on around this world, because our kids and our younger siblings and our peers are going to have to grow up in this system as well, and we have to change it today. We have to change it like 10 years ago, like 50 years ago. Change it now. So I commend everybody out there who's watching this now or could be watching this in the future. Commend you for the work you're doing, you're continuously doing. For the people a part of this panel weekly, the words, they certainly ignited me. I mean, I was already on fire, but it just gives me the ammunition to never run out. Never. When I wake up in the morning, it's never about me. I'm a part of this vessel, so I want to see it move forward as well. As we continue to go, I want to read through some of the comments today. Sastry said that it was powerful, sad, and frustrating. Just finished watching When They See Us on Netflix. If you haven't got a chance to tune into Netflix series on When They See Us, it's talking about the Central Park 5 case that happened in the 90s, 80s, late 80s, early 90s?
1989.
Yeah, 89. about 5 young kids who were falsely accused of rape. Ugh, I hate that word. But if you haven't got a chance to see that, it does talk about the injustices that we face as minorities growing up and not knowing your rights and things like that. So it's important to talk to your kids about their rights, for you to know your rights, for kids to know how to, I hate using the word behave around officers because that's just not right, you know. But how to approach an officer so that you can come out of that situation alive and well and not traumatized as many of our families are across this nation today. We have 8-year-old kids playing in front of their yard and they hide behind cars when they see a police officer drive by. We shouldn't live in that kind of fear. Again, that's traumatizing. What can you do if you were to get stopped and frisked 3 or 4 times a week on the way and from school? How many times a week or how many times a month can you take that frustration? You know, how can you really truly exceed if you're so stunted by a situation that haunts you daily? So we have to think about what's truly at risk here. And it's not just our lives, but it's our livelihood. So I wanted to throw that 2 cents in there. But enough for me, guys. One of my other panelists, you know, that was a very powerful, very compelling film. And I have to commend you guys. I know I skim through the emails, but when you choose a film, you truly choose a film. Like, I know, Jeremy, I see you a lot because you guys will throw about 5 or 6 different films in there. But when you choose one, it's like, wow. When I get to see it, it's like, wow. Like, I needed to see that. So that's amazing.
This one was Robie. But I do want to emphasize, I want to echo a few things that everybody said, because I think, indeed, this is a really wonderful teaching tool, this film. I've heard, you know, the ways sometimes students will talk about the construction of race, and I'm sure Mary goes a lot into this in her class. When students first get to that threshold concept talking about race, and they hear or they're taught that this is a construction, this is social construction more in many ways. I think that's important, that then the conversation continues. And I thought that the biologist in this film did such a wonderful job of saying, here is what it was. And then the money issue that you mentioned, Marlo, that this is the way in which race is grafted onto the reality around us. So that, yes, it's a construction, but that doesn't mean it's imaginary in terms of its impact. And so that sort of threshold concept, I thought, was really, really so lucidly presented in this film in a really in a powerful, specific context, but also going back to this moment of the mid-1660s or the mid-1600s. And so that, again, as a sort of with my other historian colleagues not here, I want to echo that as a really crucial part of the film, to draw on that historical context. And Stan mentioned that as well, that an officer of the law arrives with a whole set of preconceptions. And I now have a 5-year-old who loves cartoons, and I have to be a little bit mindful of the old cartoons that he watches, because this is the water that we swim in, and we have to be aware of what kind of world we're recreating every time we engage in anything from just the spoken language that we choose or choose not to inherit, and the culture that we choose or choose not to reproduce in the world around us. But again, that historical aspect is so important, the constructed nature of race, but then very, very real impact that continues to surround us every day. I think is a crucial sort of a 2-part conversation.
What we say in the social, I'm sorry, Robie, I just wanted to just piggyback on what Jeremy was saying. What we say in the social sciences, more specifically sociology, is that race is not real, but the consequences of race are real. So race was this made up thing, right? But it was, they intended for the consequences to be exactly what they have turned out to be. So yeah, go ahead, Robie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so my dorm mate as an undergraduate was African American, and we would have these conversations and we would talk about, yeah, race is a social construct. We know that. But he said it has a material reality. He said, I can't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be Bill or John and walk down the street and say race is, because inevitably something's going to happen. Someone's going to emphasize that he is not part of the dominant group. So yeah, it's easy to say race is social construct, but as Jeremy mentioned, it does have a reality. So.
And Mary was right when she mentioned that, you know, all they want to do is be treated, all we want to do is be treated the same as everybody else. My brother has a term where he uses when he goes out and about, and he says, give me the white boy deal. And it's so, how simple is that? You know, why would you need to say that? I took some notes here. It's a simple request. Just treat me the same way you treat the other person. You know, it's in the Lord's Prayer. And then the other thing is, don't make me have to say Black Lives Matter. But you made me have to say Black Lives Matter because of the way you've been treating me. Mm-hmm. And I will say this to all the young people out there. And the young lady said it in the film. She said, rewrite the story. And I tell you, rewrite your story. Rewrite the story, because what we're doing, even the protests and all that stuff, if you look at the film and the date on the film, it's happening today again. And so I say to you, if it's not working, change it up. And changing it up might be running for office. It might be who you put in office. It might be get yourself educated and educate others. But if it's not working, and we know it's not working because here we are again, years later, doing the same thing, rewrite your story.
But isn't it the fact that it is working? Not for Black and brown communities, but it is working. It is working exactly the way it was set up to work. When those folks in those European universities in the 1700s decided to construct race because of all of the maltreatment, the genocide, the enslavement, and so forth, that's exactly what they meant it to do. They meant it to, you know, for us to be in this strife right now. And I think, you know, the thing that scares those in power is that white people are waking up to this now.
Yes.
White people are, you know, when they saw George Floyd take his last breath, I think they did not believe it. A lot of folks did not believe, you know, up close and personal, because Rodney King was, you know, taken, a film that was taken by a guy on his balcony, his second floor balcony. And so we didn't see, you know, the trauma as much, because, and then of course they were surrounded by other cops. But, you know, we saw George Floyd. We saw Eric Garner, you know, this big husky guy getting the life choked out of him by three police officers, three New York police officers who are, by the way, running around free right now. Mm-hmm. So it is working the way it was meant to work, but you know, there's nothing like education. You know, we're all in an educational system. There is nothing like education, opening your eyes and seeing maybe for the first time, you know, like the people in South Africa, they didn't know what was going on in those townships in South Africa. They had no idea. The Afrikaners and the English had no idea what was going on, because they had a TV blackout where people were slaughtered. But once they saw, you know, it's a different situation, because Africans were the majority, or blacks were the majority in South Africa. But, you know, nevertheless, you know, colonialism, imperialism, you know, they all sort of work the same way. And I'm so glad that there was that discussion in this film too. This was a great film, you know, very compact. You know, it was a lot in just a few minutes. How long was the film, Robie? Do you remember?
I believe the runtime is 52 minutes.
Wow, it seemed like a lot shorter than that, because it just was so impactful. I just loved it.
Yeah, and Mary, I'm glad you mentioned structures, because I think it's important it's instructive to note that structures are never neutral. Structures convey advantages and disadvantages, and we're all situated differently within that structure based on age, based on race, based on gender, based on a number of factors. So when someone says the system isn't working, as you pointed out, it is working. That's what it's
working. Yeah, working in white communities, working in my community that I live in. I hardly ever see a police officer in this community. Ever in this community. So it's working because, you know, they feel like they're being, you know, they don't have to be here. They're where the bad guys are, supposedly, right? And I'm not saying that there are no bad guys in my community, because there are a lot of them, but they, you know, they just don't get caught. And I think the other thing that has really resonated with me in terms of being an African American in this country is that one of the fundamental tenets of citizenship is that we need to trust our institutions, right? Which is sort of getting what you were talking about, Robie. We need to trust our educational system. We need to trust our faith communities or faith systems. We need to trust our medical systems. You know, I walk into a doctor's office and, you know, he or she, you know, they are the experts. So I need to trust them. Yet I read that doctors, you know, think that African Americans don't feel pain the way white people do, you know. Then I'm thinking, I don't trust this institution either. Is there anything that I can trust? And people are certainly not sure. They're losing all kinds of faith in their police departments, in their social service agencies, in their educational systems, you know, and that, you know, to me is you know, that's time out. You know, I'm not a citizen if I can't trust the institutions that are here to serve me.
I was reading one of the comments from one of our attendees, Tracy Johnson, who mentioned that she's a 54-year-old African-American woman who was always raised in predominantly white neighborhoods. So she feel like it would be essential for her to take an African-American studies from attending our weekly series sessions and not knowing that this type of brutality that's going on in these communities on the daily. Trace, I just want to say thank you for of course, being a part of these series and just seeing that you're able to gain and gather information and sources from these weekly attendances. Just another staple on, you know, the work that we're doing to provide these type of sessions, these open forums for our guests to express these type of opinions and feelings that they're having.
And also, I read it too, Marlo. And what I want to say is not only learn the pain we're in, but also learn the greatness of our history. I mean, we have great history and mathematics, building. There's so much to learn about the African American community and African American history that when you take the class, don't just look for the pain, because there's a lot of love and joy and inventions and things that will benefit you also. And that way you'll better know the people, and we are the people. And the more you know the people, the more empathetic you are to the people.
Well, we hope. Yeah, we have this, you know, new ethnic studies mandate now, and I'm certainly, I know that, and I think I can speak for Jeremy also. Students leave our classrooms and they're different. And I see my students, you know, 20 years down the line, and they say, you know, they talk about seeing things that they never saw before. And that's what our classes do. You know, we want you to open your eyes. We don't want you to go out digging for anything. You don't have to dig for anything. You know, you can be in a you know, as I have been several times in a department store and seeing someone being treated differently because she does not speak English. or she is not fast enough, or she's got the wrong color skin. And what do you do? Because once you see it, you got to do something about it. But, and they, you know, they say all the time, didn't like the class when they were taking it. I probably shouldn't say that because nobody will take my classes anymore. But don't like the classes because, you know, the part of our mandate, speaking of mandates, is to make you uncomfortable. You know, this is not patty cake time when you take these classes. These contributions, I never say Black history, I never say Latino history, I say the contributions of Latinos and African Americans to American history. Because I don't want to be pushed off in a corner someplace. Because I'm right there, I'm in the middle of it. You know, my grandfather and great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather were farmers after enslavement. And, you know, their blood, sweat, and tears are in the dirt of Louisiana. I don't want to push them aside. I want them to be recognized for building this country. You know, so, but it does change you. Education, enlightenment changes you. And it changes the world, hopefully.
I want to echo that because I also teach one of those big lectures that Mary does. And they're really wonderful opportunities for long conversations. And this is an obvious transition actually because of Sastri's comment there. And I want to thank Sastri. I always see his name in the list of attendees for joining us and being a stalwart supporter of the program. We will be continuing, and Robie sent the details earlier in the chat, I think, so everybody should see that, about next week's event. We will be continuing these Wednesdays at 4 p.m. except for next week. Next week is going to be an exception to that. We're going to be, and you'll get an announcement. If you got an announcement about this, you'll in the same place, whether it's CSUSB News or in an email, you'll find out that next week on Tuesday will be at 3 p.m. We're going to be talking about police in film and television, depictions of police in film and television with Howard Henderson and Franklin Wilson, who are experts on this subject in criminal justice and I think sociology, and they're coming in from, well, they're going to zoom in from Texas and from Indiana. Yeah. So, but that will be Tuesday at 3 p.m. But yes, Sastri, we have that event. The week following, we have Professor Gascon, who is a graduate of Cal State San Bernardino, and now professor at UMass Austin. Is going to be coming back. He joined us about 7 weeks ago. This is the 12th event. And again, so that'll be the week following. And so we have events planned out. No sign of letting up. We got some new blood in with Stan joining us. So there's no worries, I think, about our endurance in terms of keeping this going. A couple of our hosts are out with family business and we'll all be back going forward. So this is for the foreseeable future. We're not showing any signs of letting up. So we already have 3 events planned out. So please stay with us. This is a long conversation, as Mary and I have with our students for 10 weeks. Now we've got 15 weeks, and it's gonna keep going, these events as well.
Yeah, and we want to also, you know, just say a little bit about long range planning, because you know we're gonna do this until they tell us to stop doing it, I guess. We want to have a conversation about the transgender community and policing, because I think just recently another transgender woman was murdered, and we are also thinking. I think we talked about this. Oh, Dr. Angela Luke from our College of Education is going to be talking about young African-American girls in school and their propensity, the school's propensity to kick them out, to suspend or whatever. They are targeting that, you know, they very famously, a video a few weeks ago showed a 6-year-old being arrested and taken off in handcuffs in I don't know if I can't remember if it was a local school. I don't think it was local. I think it was somewhere in the Midwest. But yeah, we've got our thinking caps on, and we're planning. And just to emphasize, next week, one of the reasons people have pushed back so much about, you know, when we use the term defund the police, and of course we don't mean defund all of the police, but is because of most of us never are encountered by police officers, right? So how do we, you know, in the social sciences, we ask, how do you know what you know? What is that process like? You're not born thinking that all cops are heroes. You're not born thinking that all Black people are bad. So, and we get a lot of our information on television and in film. And so we're going to try and deconstruct that with our guests next week to show us how, you know, systematically through the centuries even, that we've come to think of, you know, Sherlock Holmes, you know, has these magical powers, and Superman, magical powers. And when you look at the data, it doesn't really reflect how we feel about, you know, what we think we know about cops. You know, like all these cops are getting killed, and that's not true. The number of police deaths are going down. They're going way down. The fact that cops don't stop crime, they just don't. They don't, but we think they do. And so there's, you know, just a lot of stuff that we want to get in next week. So, and hopefully we'll have an audience with more students now because classes are starting. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see. But we think it's going to be pretty exciting. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, Mary, if I could just jump in, I'd like to invite all of the attendees to send us any ideas they'd like to have, like discussions or topics or film suggestions, and we can make it happen.
Absolutely. Oh, you can make it happen, Robie. You're Mr. Magic. You know, we just throw out a film and Robie says, let me work on it. Let me work on it. So yeah, we really appreciate that.
Well, I'm grateful that I have a dean who is very supportive. Dean Cesar Caballero, he's very supportive of the program. So whenever we bounce ideas off him, it's always a go. So we have a lot of support.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Any more questions, Marlo?
No, just want to thank you, Robert, for saying that. If you guys ever have any comments or ideas towards the show, we're open. We're very open. Again, we're here for you. So our content is what you want to hear, what you want to see. So please share those ideas with us as the weeks progress, if you have any. We're working hard to keep it coming. So trust me. Another side note was, don't forget that next week's show is not on Wednesday. I know they just said it, but just let me punch it in one more time. It'll be at Tuesday at 4 p.m. I'm sorry, is it 3 p.m.? 3 p.m. Tuesday at 3 p.m. next week's show. And then the following weeks we'll go right back to Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Some of the attendees asked if they were to miss a show, would they be able to catch up still. Trust me, guys, we are working on your catalog. We're almost there. So just stay tuned. Everything will be posted. We're getting some great feedback on the footage. So just stay tuned for that as well. I'd like to thank my co-host, Stan Futch, for being here with me today. Stan, I'm just so excited to be sitting next to you now on the weekly now. So now I just got to show up on Mondays. Yeah, I got to show up on Mondays at 12 p.m. now. But thank you, Stan, for lending us your time, man. We know you didn't have to be here, but you saw something in us, and we truly thank you for that. To the rest of you guys, you know how I feel. I will see you in a little bit. But to our guests, thank you for joining us I'm sorry, Jeremy had one more.
Yeah, we've got actually a quick comment in from Cassandra about where we can send, folks can send suggestions. And Robie and I have been the contacts on this. So, sorry about that. I will should I just write in I'll write in my email address, you put in yours, Robie?
Sounds good.
Okay. So Cassandra, we'll see that there in the chat.
And Jeremy, did you talk about how the past shows can be viewed, or the panel discussions can be viewed? Did you?
Yes.
Did you?
I better go ahead and send, I'll share that link as well in the chat. It's at the History Club YouTube page. That's CSUSB History Club YouTube page, and I'll share that link in the chat right now as well.
Okay, okay, great.
We're getting, as Marlo said, we're getting up to speed. We've got the first 6. This, I think, is this 12 or lucky 13?
I think you all said last week was 11, so this must be 12, right? Because I'm a mathematician, that's why I know that.
All right.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
there's the link. Yeah, and we do have some really nice videography work coming in with the next one. So we're gonna have some nice finished products going up there. But we've got the first 6 videos up there for you to catch up on.
Okay, fantastic.
Right. So yeah, if you see the link, please watch and as well with your peers, with your classmates, with your groups, your group chats. Share the content. I know if you enjoy it, I know your peers would too. So that is it this week for Conversations on Race and Policing, the series. And we'll see you guys back here next week, Tuesday at 3 p.m. guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Marlo.
Thanks, Marlo.
Good job, Robie.
Marlo.
Thanks, Marlo.